Hello, Enrich community. This is your virtual bestie, Simran Adderley. Welcome back to Enrich Podcast, a show where we explore topics that inspire you, grow you, and make you a better version of yourself. We have a special guest today, Jas Hundal, and we're going to be talking about the topic emotional intimacy and how important it is to have emotional intimacy in relationships, whether that's friendship or even romantic relationships. So welcome to the show, Jas.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Thank you so much for taking the time from your busy schedule to be here. So very grateful for that. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
And just a little bit about Jas' background. I'm actually going to mention what she has done in the community and how much she's passionate about this topic in the area that she is working in. Jas is a mental health practitioner and has been working with the members of South Asian community. Jas has her master's of social work and bachelor's of social work from the University of Victoria and a certificate in advanced facilitation and consultation from the Justice Institute of BC. Jas is trained in a range of therapeutic modalities and has worked diligently in the field of mental health and addiction since 2006. Jas is passionate about helping members of her community learn ways to improve their mental health by using holistic, inclusive, and strength-based practices. Wow. I'm impressed. Amazing. So let's actually delve right into the topic today, which is emotional intimacy. And I am so excited to learn about this topic because I've never heard of this term before, ever. I'm in a long-term relationship myself. And something that what I understand with this topic is you want to be seen and felt and heard in this area. So let's actually start off by asking a question that probably everyone has here. What is emotional intimacy? Maybe if you can describe it in your own terms.
Sure. So a lot of times, like you mentioned, when people think intimacy, they're unaware of the many different types. So we've got emotional intimacy, we've got physical intimacy, which people are more aware of, but we also have spiritual and mental intimacy. So when we talk about emotional is that need to feel secure and connected and validated with your partner, whether that's an intimate relationship, as you mentioned, or it could be a friendship or even within a work environment.
Right. That's beautiful. And something that I've noticed, all of us crave that belonging in every relationship. When it's surface level, I can all go out and have drinks with someone, but I personally have always felt like I feel safe and I'm an open book myself. Mm-hmm. But something I've noticed with relationships, I'll crave felt and seen and heard in every relationship. So I'm sure not a lot of people sometimes think that they're craving that, mm-hmm. but that is definitely very important to have that long-term relationship and to have that strong bond relationship. So I cannot wait to talk about how we can build emotional intimacy as well. Can you actually tell us why is it crucial for us to have emotional intimacy in a healthy relationship?
So if we go back to just as us as human beings, we are hardwired to connect with one another. So from early childhood experiences, we'll often have, if you can think of the first experience at school or the first time you really connected with one another, it's going to be some sort of reaction that you have that you shared with that other person. So if, for example, if you're at the playground and somebody says, hey, can you come play with me, Simran? And, you're excited, you're feeling happy at that point, and you start to play with this other individual, and then all of a sudden the person asks you again, or now you've formed a connection with that one person from that class, and that circle kind of grows as we, develop and go through our school years and high school years as well as in general. So when we talk about why this is important, we're actually hardwired to connect. So whenever if we look at the neuroscience behind it, mm-hmm. whenever we connect with the individual, our brain fires. Right. So it loves that feeling of like, oh, I have something in common with Simran, and, I have something in common with this person, and this person really gets me. So more of those neurons that are firing together, our brain is almost expanding and growing and developing at that moment.
Right. Oh, that totally makes sense why we all crave that for sure.
Definitely.
And I think at the end of the day, we're all searching for that community, and that's how we heal too, right? Absolutely. And something that the conversations I'm having, a lot of conversation with my girlfriends or even just sometimes colleagues and strangers, they're all craving that connection with someone, whether that is over a cup of coffee, mm-hmm. or having a drink with someone, or even in relationships. Something I noticed with my recent conversations with my girlfriends, they're going through certain relationship challenges, and they mentioned that I don't feel seen. I don't feel like I'm being heard. I feel like I keep repeating myself. Is this something that you find your experience with maybe someone that you're dealing with in a particular situation that you're helping someone else? Is this what usually the challenge is in a relationship where they feel like disconnected?
Yeah, so when we look at our early stages of a relationship, there's always like that initial connection. Like this person might be attractive towards me. I like the way that they dress. I like the way that they look. And then we start to share experiences about ourselves. So we might be bonded together if we went to the same school. For a lot of us as South Asians, the similar experiences that we had growing up. So when we go through different life transitions, what dating is one transition, getting married is another transition, having kids, moving, in-laws, those are different challenges that will come out in life. We will change ourselves, but sometimes we don't put the same effort and time into that relationship. So when people say I'm not feeling seen or heard, a lot of the times there's other things underlying that are getting in the way. So it's not that the person or the partner isn't intentionally doing that, but a lot of the times what I've heard from men on the other side is that they're saying, I put in the hard work. Right. I did all that. Like, I thought you were good. Right. But intimacy, especially in emotional intimacy, needs to grow and nourish and flourish as the relationship continues. It's not a one time been there, done it, and now you move on to the next thing.
Right. And that is so true. I can actually think about certain situations in my own relationship. So me and my husband, we've been together for 11 years now and almost married for 4 years. And we all go through challenges. There's no way that our relationship was perfect. We still keep working on ourselves and working on a relationship. But something I noticed, you mentioned about like, even though I've expressed this many times, there's underlying issue. We actually have to get help because after a marriage, we found that we were running into the same relationship issues again and again. Actually, the whole transition, it had to be more of like cut out the outside noise and kind of like look at what's happening here between us, because sometimes we tend to also involve other things. We think running away from this situation could be easier, but I found that we would come back to the same issue again and again. And it was all down to, I still remember the last conversation where I felt like our relationship really started to go upwards again, was we sat down, we had an intimate conversation, how he was feeling and how I was feeling. And we try to do this more often. I found like, and I don't want to generalize this, but I found like men do experience like they have a hard time sometimes expressing. It could be from the beliefs that they have maybe, but something he said, I don't know. It's sometimes hard for me to express. Just let it go and move on. But I'm like, there is the same issue that's coming up. So we need to talk about this. So that is something where I can think of the pattern that was coming up. Yes. So what do you think from your own experience, or something that you could recommend someone that was running into the same issues and they don't feel heard and seen? Where can they really start from to build that emotional intimacy?
So building emotional intimacy. So when we're talking about using an example, is think of your emotional intimacy as a rope. Okay. Every thing that is positive, right? That could be a habit, that could be a certain gesture your partner does, is going to build that thread on that rope and make it really tight and strong. So think of, if you said you've been in an 11-year relationship, and I said to you, Surin, tell me some things that your partner has done over those 11 years that have been positive and good. And you'd say to me, Jas, he does this, and you'd come together and you would see like, okay, wow, this person does do a lot for me to help, build that emotional intimacy. Now, anytime something happens, or if there is no emotional intimacy, or there's negative things happening, it's going to strip away from that rope.
That's true.
So we need those threads, little by little, to join together. And the stronger that rope is, the more we feel connected to one another. Right? If something has happened that's negative, that's distressful, that's a one time, that's an off, or something your partner does to irritate you a little bit, well, that's not going to affect that strong rope, because you're going to say, well, this isn't the norm. Right? So it takes the little experiences, sometimes those daily habits, that allow us to strengthen our relationship. True. And if things get in the way, such as with the in-laws or kids or financial barriers, or sometimes people say, like, I worked really hard, I'm tired at the end of the day, all that comes into effect because that little gesture is now not being done, and the one partner will feel unseen or unheard or not validated.
That's very true. And I can think of this similar pattern showing up in other relationships too, as you mentioned, not just in romantic relationships, with like friendships as well.
Absolutely.
So when the rope is strong, I think the little threads really don't affect that. So thank you. I actually want to switch some gears here and talk about physical intimacy. Can you actually tell us how that's different than emotional intimacy here?
So when we talk about physical intimacy, we're talking about that sexual nature, right? So we're talking about the fact that sometimes people can have that physical intimacy without needing that emotional intimacy.
Okay.
So you can go have a relationship with someone and you don't need to connect with them on a one-to-one level, right?
Okay.
You can say like, I just need to physically connect with that person and I'm done. I can move on to the next, or I can come back to this relationship if needed. But I'm not going to share my deepest, darkest secrets. I'm not going to, let that person know. I'm going to keep my guard up.
Okay.
So when it comes to intimacy, sometimes when you think of it as a broad term, a lot of people will not know the different types. And they'll say, well, intimacy just means where we get together.
Right.
And as long as we're doing that, that means we don't need to spend time doing the other stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that totally makes sense. And can you actually tell us what are some signs that really indicate there's a lack of emotional intimacy in a relationship?
So a lot of the times it's not, like you said, not feeling validated or seen or heard. So if I am bringing up something to my partner, let's just say I'm stressed about something and I'm really needing my partner to hear me out, listen to me, understand me. A lot of the times if my partner's saying, figure it out yourself, or I can't help you with this, or you need to go seek help somewhere, I'm going to feel like there's a wall up and I'm not going to want to talk to my partner. I might isolate myself and you withdraw from that relationship, or I might want to go into like more of a fight response where now I'm arguing, criticizing, and nitpicking because of this unaddressed need.
Mm-hmm. And where do you think that really stems from? Because I would assume that the other or both partners really care about actually understanding the person's feelings because they love them, right? Mm-hmm. Is it usually because they can't really hold that space for themselves, or maybe they're at capacity? Because I think what's important that we have the other understanding too, like why someone might not be able to hold space for you or even able to be intimate in that aspect. Mm-hmm. Is that one of the reasons?
It can be one of the reasons. So this is a very gray area, right? Because everyone's circumstance is going to be different. But again, people always say to me, you always bring it back to the childhood. And I say yes, because that's where the root is, right? Yes. So if we look at, South Asians as a culture, a lot of the times it's stuff it, hide it, I don't feel it.
Yes.
Other than the primary emotions, right? I remember as a kid, my parents saying like, don't laugh a lot and you don't cry either and you can't be too angry. There's always this expectation that you just take your emotions and you put them away or you sweep them under the rug and you just stay in that normal range, right? And then you go to like a school environment where they're saying, talk about your feelings and reflect, and you're being asked to do something that's exact opposite. So for a lot of, not all men, but for a lot of men, just stuff it, hide it, don't talk about it. Anger is one of those ones that definitely, if a man is angry, you can see it, you can feel it, you can hear it. That's okay, that's accepted. But anything else, then the man is seen as weak or vulnerable. So men will often feel closest to their intimate partners than they do anybody else. However, it may not be the same way that they feel like women feel close to in some of their relationships. So the conversation I'm having with my best friend can go on for hours, right? However, my conversation with my husband may be limited to if he doesn't have a good grasp on his own emotions or expressing them or understanding them or even naming them, it's too much of an expectation for me to say, hey, you're not emotionally available or you're not trying. So we have to go back a little bit to say, hey, what was this person's upbringing like? Were they allowed to, express their emotions? Like, are they still living in an extended family unit where they're not supposed to be talking about their emotions? And what is their understanding of that? Right. How do we get them to that spot where they feel comfortable having those conversations without feeling judged or embarrassed or shamed for it?
Right. That is very true, because that actually reminds me, in a relationship or any other friendship or romantic relationship, we do carry our baggages as well, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to open your own backpack, right? And so do your own work too, so you can feel more closer. So I think that's a great perspective. Thank you for sharing that. I also want to talk about, you mentioned a little bit about, physical aspect as well. And I have we've talked about this post actually over Instagram message, and just for me to understand the perspective for myself. And this post went like, I wish we talked more about how often people use sex to avoid emotional intimacy. Is this true?
So, and I know the post that you're talking about. So it's one of those things where sex is the easier one for us to kind of go to, right? So one of the things people think is like, if I just, sleep with this person or, have a relationship with this person, that's good enough. Right. So another part is the other person or the other partner may not feel that. Like they may need that emotional connection first for them to feel safe and secure and then move on to sex as the next step.
Got
So
it.
this is where there's that disconnect of like we see sex as a band-aid. Because if we feel connected physically, then the emotional stuff will just die down, right? One of the things with emotional intimacy is that it actually lowers the distress level. So your brain will actually feel pain less if you feel emotionally connected.
Oh,
So there was this experiment done by a psychologist where he monitored, it was a woman that was going in for an MRI, and she had a stress response monitored. And the ones that were in safe, secure, committed relationships, they actually felt less distressed during that MRI. And the ones that were not in those healthy relationships, the stress centers in their brains were just exploding. And this was just the fact of having somebody beside you.
right.
Some of them were like holding hands, some of them were just giving a soft stroke on the shoulder, and some of them were just saying, positive words of encouragement. So that makes a huge difference when it comes to our own level of distress and how we handle it.
Right. Lovely. That makes total sense. And I also want to talk about the importance of communication in, emotional intimacy, stronger relationships. Can you actually provide some effective techniques that our listeners can use here to enhance emotional intimacy in their relationship?
So I always say tip number one, start with yourself first, right? So it's one of those things. It's like, if I have this need, I'm not feeling validated. What is it? What's the problem here, right? Identify what the issue is and come up with a solution yourself. So you can't just say, well, I have this problem, Simran, because you're going to give me a solution and I'm going to say, no, that's not going to work. Then you're going to say, what about this, Jas? And I'm going to say, no, that's not going to work either. So I have to say, Simran, this is what the problem is. This is what I've noticed or observed or felt. This is what would be helpful, right? So tip number one is take it back and come up with a solution. Make it easy for your partner or for your friend to say whatever you need at that time.
Got it.
Second tip I would say is when we're looking at what really helps with emotional intimacy, understanding and not coming from a place of judgment.
Okay.
So kind of coming it from point of curiosity, and I just want to explore. When I say this to you, can you tell me back what that means? Like, what are you actually hearing? Because a lot of the times we might think we're listening to our partners, but we're waiting for them to finish so we can fill in the gaps or we can say what's next, right? So it's sort of like, let's take a pause and tell me what you heard back or what did you understand? And if that person didn't get it, well, now I have the chance to provide them with that information and saying, well, no, that's not correct, or this is what I meant, right? And then it doesn't go back to that tennis match.
You know what? That makes you reflect because as I mentioned earlier, when we were having challenges, myself and my partner, I actually remember my partner bringing that up. Are you even listening to me?
Yeah.
So you know what? I want to take accountability for that because I personally felt like I wanted to be heard. And I think, as you mentioned about the tennis match over here, I just wanted to be heard first. But you know what? It's also on me. The onus is on me too, where he actually needs to be heard as well. So that reminds me of the situation where I felt like I was not being fair, quote unquote, and in that way, because I couldn't hold space for myself in that situation. But that is so true. Listening out of curiosity and not judgment, because that's what probably I was doing at the time. Amazing. Good reflection, right?
Third one I would just want to say is when we're looking at having, well, what's going to build this emotional intimacy? So what's going to add some threads to my rope? Okay, well, I have to have some time with my partner. Okay. And sometimes we call this like downtime activity. Sometimes we call it like grounding. Sometimes we can refer to this as like end of the night. But if you're gone all day and you're busy with your job and your duties and your partner's busy with their jobs or duties or even friendships, right? Everybody has their own life. They've got their own challenges.
Right.
What's one way you can connect where that other person feels heard, feels listened to, feels validated? And sometimes that's an activity at the end of the day saying, hey, let's do a 10-minute check-in, right? Or let's do a 10-minute checkout. Just right there. If there's something that I did today that pissed you off or irritated you or you didn't like, tell me today. Don't bring it up 3 weeks later because most likely I'm going to forget, right? So having those timely discussions. And sometimes at night we're tired, right? We are getting ready for the next day. So it doesn't need to be a long discussion, but just some time where we can connect and do something together as a couple is usually important.
Got it. And I think that is very important. Would you recommend doing this on a daily basis or weekly, or is there a frequency?
I would say if it's like 10 minutes, everyone's got 10 minutes, right? But just, it's a quick check-in, right? Okay. So we do this at work. We do a quick huddle or muster or like, what's the game for today, right? Just checking in with that person and moving on from how was your day to like, what did you do today that was really fun? Or what was something that was like the bright or the highlight of your day? The person can say, let me think about that. Right. And you've shared something positive, you've connected, and then you can say, we'll revisit this for a longer session on the weekend.
Right. Oh, well, that's amazing. That's a good tip. I'm going to implement that for sure. Every single day. I feel like we try to do this, but we do forget.
And get
our
consent.
schedules are
Ask your partner, say, hey, I have this idea, or I learned about this techniques. Can we try this together? Right?
Yeah.
So that's another huge, I think, before we moved on to tips, I should have said, make sure your partner consents to it and is agreeable and knows what you're doing, right? Don't just throw this thing.
Hey, we're going to do this check-in today. Where did this come from? No, totally. I love that. I actually want to bring up something. So a question that arises in my mind. Let's say there's a breach of trust in a relationship, right? And couple, the partners really want to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
How would you say they can really handle that conflict between the couple that really occurred and start rebuilding that emotional intimacy?
Mm-hmm. So it depends on what that breach of trust is. So a lot of times with emotional intimacy, we, especially nowadays, we'll see a lot of people will say, well, he messaged this other girl, or he liked this girl's picture on Instagram, or he sent him a DM and he responded, right? So we have to be very clear with our partners what's permitted in this relationship and what's not, right? If you are an influencer and you're going to have 10,000 followers, chances are there's going to be male and female. Right. However, if you're someone that is barely on social media and you've initiated this interaction with someone, well, what was the intent or what was the gist of it?
Right.
Was it just like a careless, like, oh, this is a nice picture and I quickly liked it because I appreciated something about this person? Or was it more than that? So whenever it's a breach of trust, if our rope is strong, it's going to be like, I can understand why you did that. I personally don't like that. For me, I would appreciate if you didn't. But if that person is saying, well, there's nothing wrong, right? And not validating my feelings and saying, you're just blowing this out of proportion, or you're over exaggerating this whole thing and making it bigger and trying to create problems, well, then there's a different issue here, right? Because that person is not only being undermined, but they're also being gaslit, right? And they're psychologically, what they're feeling is being twisted into, well, I don't want to create a problem in my relationship. Maybe it isn't a relationship. So that's where people get anxious, or people get, stuck in their emotions. So kind of to go back and say, like, what was it about that behavior that I didn't like? And some of it is going to be obvious, but we need to kind of lay those rules down earlier on in the relationship to say, this is acceptable for me, but this isn't.
That's true. And I love that you're talking about rules and standards in a relationship. And I can think of some standards that my partner and I have. For instance, most of my girlfriends in the past would say, like, are you chill when your husband is on vacation? Like, you don't care. Like, do you not want to text him all the time? I'm like, no, he lets me be. When I'm out and about, I don't need to be on my phone. Like, of course, if there's something that we need to text, and it would be different for someone else's relationship, right? I don't really project my own standards in other people. It's like, hey, this is what we do. I remember in the past, and I think I was still building that maybe like trust within me and the partner, where I found like someone made a comment, this is years ago, like I would be like, am I doing this wrong? Is it supposed to be like this in this relationship? Am I too chill? Kind of thing. So I love that you mentioned that it's important to know what's important in your relationship, because every relationship is different. Absolutely. And I've noticed that sometimes too, if someone's going through something in their relationship, they start comparing, and we've all done that, where you start comparing other people's relationship. Well, this is working, but it all comes down to what is right in your relationship or not, right? Absolutely. So I think that's a big takeaway. And I've noticed that we start to compare and kind of see, well, this is working in their relationship, but it could be different, right? You have different set of rules. Yeah. Love that. Absolutely. How would you say couples can maintain emotional intimacy alive over a long period of time, during even stressful periods as well? So
when we're looking at continuous efforts, that's what's needed. So you can't expect to go to the gym on one day and have a six-pack for the rest of your life, right? So this is like everything that I need to invest in myself needs to be a continuous effort. So if I've got a diet that I need to be able to stick with, or if I'm drinking water and that's my habit that I want to get into for the new year, right? I'm going to have to maintain that for the rest of the year. True. So there's going to be some periods where there is going to be less time, there's going to be stressors, there's going to be challenges, but there still needs to be the effort put in. right?
it.
So
Yes.
beginning of the relationship, you see lots of it because we're all on our best behavior. And, we give the person the benefit of the doubt and everything's all good. And then we're like, no, I really know this person, right? So we get a little bit comfortable. But knowing that as human beings, we're going to change. We're not going to stay the same.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and giving your partner that benefit of the doubt to say, okay, hey, where I see us withdrawing a little bit from one another. What would be helpful for you? Or is there anything I'm doing that, is getting in the way? Because again, coming back to that self-reflection and having those open discussions without feeling, judged or, embarrassed about it. Because we all go through those ebbs and flows in life.
That's very true. Yeah, that's an amazing tip for all of us and our listeners as well here. That was amazing. Thank you so much. I learned so much from you today. Something I wanted to ask you and ask all the podcast guests here as well. What inspires and motivates you every single day?
I would have to say my kids. So when it comes down to the field that I'm in and the work that I do, for me, it always is about creating a better place, changing what, unfortunately, I wasn't able to change as a child,
Right.
and giving my kids and, everyone else's kids that future. So if we can break the cycle, now is the time to do it. And, for my two little kids, I always look at them and I always see myself in them. And I always say it's my responsibility to now carry on and create that change. So if I do it for anyone, I do it for my kids.
Yeah, beautiful. I love that. There's always a big reason why, and that's your why right
Absolutely.
there. So thank you. Thank you, Jas, for being here today. This was lovely. And do want to mention before we leave here today, please subscribe to our channel. Leave us a like, comment below, send us any questions our way, and I'll also leave Jas' website or links below here. And please keep supporting us. Share this episode with someone that you truly care about. It's going to help us reach other listeners as well. I'm going to keep bringing amazing podcast episodes like Jas, and super excited to, do this again with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to leave you with this, like I always do, sending you a lot of love and positive vibes. Thank you once again, and see you next time. Thank you.